On this episode of AV Week, the safety procedures AVIXA is putting in place for InfoComm 2021 happening this fall. Also taking a look at one of the first AV trade shows to hit the stage and discrimination in the industry. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 510, recorded Friday, May 28th, 2021. Coaching Moment.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Sennheiser. For over 75 years, Sennheiser has been a leader in pro audio and is now offering a wide variety of touchless and traditional audio solutions for both corporate and educational campus-wide audio.
And by
Atlona, the go-to provider for AV signal distribution and control in corporate, higher education, and residential spaces.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright, your host, with us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week, and we have a couple of doozies, let me tell you. First and foremost, Erica Williams from Henderson Engineers, just down Highway 70 from me. Welcome, ma'am.
Welcome. Hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. A gentleman I haven't seen in a year and a half in person. He's one of my favorite Tims. Including myself, Tim Trost, from Middle Atlantic / LeGrand AV. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Tim. How's it going?
Good to see you. And a young man I met virtually a year ago, and now he works for one of my buddies, Mr. John Ivey over at Atlas IED. Executive Vice President Matt Shashesky from Atlas IED. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Good to be here.
All right, thanks so much. First story comes to us, and it kind of blew up on the Twitters, as the kids say. This actually comes to us from the dailymail.co.uk, which I believe is the first time I've ever uttered that on AV Week. A first story from the Mail. An employee of Exertis over in the UK is suing the distributor for £6.6 million, roughly $9.4 million US, for racist abuse and discrimination. The 36-year-old has already won claims of racial discrimination. He was allegedly told he was, quote-unquote, the only ethnic on the team and called a, quote-unquote, temperamental Syrian immigrant who was working for ISIS. Among other insults, he is alleging he was referred to as an Arab shoe bomber. A tribunal in the UK had found 3 of his coworkers did indeed racially harass him. We did reach out to Exertis for a comment. This is what they had to say. The quote-unquote, the employment tribunal decision relates to Exertis and a breach of the Equality Act 2010 within a specific area of the business. When the complaint was made 4 years ago, a full internal investigation took place, resulting in disciplinary action. We fully respect the tribunal's decision and take the findings extremely seriously. This was a unique case across a business of more than 1,800 employees. However, it was clear that certain behaviors fell significantly below the standards we expect. Our response and ongoing commitments to invest heavily in increasing awareness in relation to diversity will ensure that this should not happen again. Tim, I'm going to start with you. You and Matt both work for multinationals, Legrand headquartered in Paris. When you look at diversity and inclusion policies and training, what else can a corporation do to ensure something like this doesn't happen? And if it does, it's handled, I don't know, a little bit more quickly or a little bit more swiftly than it appears, at least, this took place.
Yeah, it's a heartfelt story. I mean, you feel for the guy just having this experience. We, being a European-based company, have woven in our fabric DEI and CSR. It's part of our metrics. It's part of our financial targets as an organization, and we make commitments on an annual basis to continually improving the workforce and our ability to support and include people of all sorts of backgrounds. So, it's a tough one, and unfortunately, having had some of our own different types of issues surface in the past, I think the point you make about urgency, speed, and responsiveness of the organization is what, from the outside looking in, you want to see as a company, especially in the industry where we're actively pursuing and trying to drive it. But internally within the organization, it starts with the team members. It starts with the people. If you see something, say something. Kind of that adage, and the magnitude in which this has transpired. You got to think about the culture in the organization and how they respond to things.
Erica, nobody can see you, but you are nodding your head. So I'm going to go to you next. I'll point out the fact that 3 of the employees were found to have harassed this young man. One of those, though, was his direct supervisor, right? And these the other 2's supervisor. When you look at a story like this, what does that say to you about kind of the inclusion of the industry and what we have still yet to learn?
Well, I mean, honestly, it says a lot. And like Tim said, it comes down to the employees. I'm sure most of us can say that we've seen our organizations making DE&I pledges, and we're putting out infographics and emails about all these changes that we're making and everything else. But when it comes down to it, leadership isn't going to solve this problem alone. Creating policies obviously help. And honestly, in that statement that they had to say that the behavior fell below their standards and whatnot, I'm not familiar, obviously, with European law, but I mean, it's a zero tolerance policy. Like, you can't say that their behavior fell below your expectations. That's a zero tolerance thing that people need to start upholding and saying the right words to vocalize that. Because the way that sounds, it just makes it makes me think they're just going to let people let it happen again, and they're just going to get a smack on the hand for it. And that's where it trickles down actually to the employees. You're right, absolutely, Tim, that if you see something, say something. And we've seen in companies and in society and just so much over the last year that people need to stop waiting for someone else to do something. People need to take action, because the worst action is inaction. Don't be afraid to speak up. And, in this guy's case with the supervisor, like a company of 1,800 people, you're telling me that every person in that company or every person in that unit that he worked was okay with what was happening? I find that very unlikely. So, check your employee handbook. What is the order? What is the order of reporting? If it's the supervisor that's doing something wrong, then what's the next step? Don't just wait for somebody else to do it. You have to speak up and take action. And, honestly, if you go through all the motions at the office and stuff still isn't happening, put them on a shame board, put them on Twitter so people know, we've done this. That recently happened with Google, actually. There was a woman, I think she was part of the marketing department and suffered from all kinds of discrimination. And then she said, you know what, I'm taking the social so people know. Like, don't do business with those people, because they obviously don't have a culture that sounds very good, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't work there, but it doesn't sound good. And those aren't the kinds of people that I would want to do business with. That's not the type of business that I want to reflect poorly on my business culture. So
you actually bring a really good point up about not doing business with them. We'll point out the fact that Exertis has expanded over the years. This past fall stampede here in the States and in North America, they had already been purchased by Exertis previous, but they transferred their name from Stampede to Exertis to give more of a global outreach for that name, as opposed to Midwich, who does own a number of distributors, including our friends at Starin here in the States. Matt, talk for a second. What can we do with a moment like this to use it as a teaching moment or a coaching moment for your employees, but also for your representatives? I mean, America makes a point. Exertis is a distributor, so in some sense, they are a representative of the brands that they carry, right? So how can we use this as a coaching moment for manufacturing and all the way through the chain?
Well, I think Erica made and Tim made some great points, and how that can be utilized as a teaching moment is just looking at the culture. I mean, we all go into distributors, for example, from a manufacturer standpoint, and we talk a lot about business. but observing the culture itself is also important. And simply listing things in a policy isn't very good if you don't have a culture that it has openness, meaning you can go to, it doesn't matter who you go to, whether it's the CEO's office or the COO or wherever you need to go to voice a complaint. That has to be the biggest thing, is that type of stuff. We may list, and probably many, especially these days, many companies list what is not tolerated. But do you have an open door policy so that people feel safe and can go and talk to folks and know something's going to happen to correct the situation? Because it's really hard for me to say that with that size company that only 4 people knew about this action going on. So more people had to know. Therefore, the other people that knew about it that weren't necessarily involved clearly didn't feel safe or correct or whatever in reporting it to somebody else, which is not acceptable at all for anything in a company, that when someone's doing wrongdoing that they shouldn't be, and in this case, egregious. So that's how I think we can all learn from, is look at it, check the culture, and when you're going into businesses, check their culture and understand when you walk away, I don't care if they can do, millions of dollars, might not reflect well with our company if they're representing us.
Thanks for watching this first segment of AV Week. To check out the rest of the episode for free, click on the link below or go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.